All right, welcome to Wednesday. I think it's Wednesday. Is that right? Wednesday? Yeah. I don't know. I get all confused and stuff. But hey, at least I get to do this from at home. You can see my Christmas village behind me. Can I see it? I'm like in the way. I don't know how to turn and hold this thing up at the same time. So, anyways, here's my Christmas village. No bald spots either. I knew you were looking. Anyways, glad to be back at it. Yesterday was not a great day, just didn't feel very well. Thank you to those few students who actually checked in, wished me well to see how I was doing. So hopefully we'll be back at it tomorrow. Reminder for tomorrow, which will be Thursday. Tomorrow, for the seventh graders, you're going to check in and we're going to go over your tests. Now, you might look at your scores, you might be all concerned and everything. Just wait, don't worry too much about it until Thursday. We'll cover it. The biggest thing, obviously, is did you know your vocabulary? If you didn't, then that was probably problematic for your test. So, again, we'll go over it tomorrow. So make sure you pop in. That'll be the main thing that we do. You will have a little bit of a reading to do. No, I'm going to show you a video. It's time for a video. So we'll find a video on the interwebs for you to watch. So anyways, here is today's set of notes. This is part 2 of Rome 2. So you could call it 3-2 technically because it's the third section. So anyways, let's get this bad boy going here. All right. Anyway, so yesterday we introduced the second part of Rome, and the second part of Rome is really about building it up to the point of where it is at its highest. This is during that Pax Romana, which again means the 200 years of Roman peace, under whom Augustus, you would say, or Octavian. Augustus meaning our revered or majestic one. So we're going to look at a little more on culture. In this case, it says Roman science and engineering. Now, we did look at a little bit of engineering the other day because we talked about how the Romans had built the aqueducts. They had built the Colosseum or the Colosseum and other buildings too. So in terms of engineering, they were actually really, really good. And that even goes for their roads as well. So we'll look at also, as I said, some science too. So we'll look at some of these Roman scientists. And the first guy is named Galen. I'm trying to figure out where to hide my face, but you can see it there. Galen, Galen, Galen. There you go. Rocking the beard of wisdom. So we know he was a pretty smart guy wearing a half of a potato on his head, and we're not sure what that is. But anyway, skull cap, early skull cap, I don't know. But at least he had the beard. So anyways, Galen was a scientist who emphasized anatomy. He emphasized anatomy, which is the study of human structure. So if you're looking at these little pictures here, you can tell human structure is not just the outsides, but the insides as well. So first of all comes the question as to why does it take so long for us to get to this, to where people are starting to get interested in science, in human anatomy. Now, it's not to say that they haven't, but believe it or not, religion is actually a big reason why people were held back for so long in anatomy, because several religions teach that the body is a temple. Some more than others, I suppose, or in some cases, the temple of doom, I guess. But they forbade. They forbade students, people cutting into human bodies and looking to see what was on the inside. And if you think about the Egyptians, it actually makes sense because they believed that you could take it with you when you went. And when you went to the afterlife, you would resurrect yourself and your organs and stitch yourself back together. So you really wouldn't be too damaged or tore up by the time you got to the afterlife if that's what you believed in. So along comes this Galen guy who does focus on human structure and anatomy, and he dissects not humans but animals to understand the way that the human body works. Now, obviously, if you know anything about science, humans are an exact one-to-one copy for animals, but pretty close, right? And you have to start somewhere. So this is the case for Galen, is, you build up what you've had. And we talked about the Greek scientists, how they also had their guys who focused on anatomy. We're going to build on that when we get to the Middle Ages. And we're going to look at some guy named Michelangelo, who worked on the artwork of a lot of things that you're going to see in this, of how not just like the bone structure, but the insides, like the tissue, the muscles, and things like that really look. So this really is, again, pushing what we had once learned about and going even further. And in the case of Galen, those drawings, like you would see there, perhaps, but I don't think that's one of his actual drawings. But the books that he made of both writing and of pictures have been used for 1,500 years. And you're like, man, that's an old book. First of all, they had different editions, but at the same time, it took a while for people to get to where they could update it, and it was really focused upon. And again, that really goes to that Middle Ages with Michelangelo, and you'll see when we get to that section how good his stuff was. But for a while, not a lot changed because, I mean, if you're talking about anatomy and human structure, nothing is going to change unless you're talking about like medicine and illnesses, causes, and cures and things like that. But medicine as a whole and health is very slow progressing over this time period because people just don't quite understand it yet, and the technology hasn't quite gotten to that point. Second guy is Ptolemy. Ptolemy. Now, Ptolemy, the P is silent. Ptolemy, again, beard of wisdom. He's got that other half of that potato. And you can see what he's doing. He's pointing up at the stars. So there's a wink, wink, nod, nod as to what he is known for. And also he's holding this cross. So clearly he was wait, that is not a cross. That is actually if you look at it, it's a sextant. That would be sextant. That is a almost ruler or compass for the stars. So that gives you a little indication as to what Ptolemy was all about. So he lived in Egypt. Now you're like, wait a second, this guy's an Egyptian then, he's not Roman. Well, Egypt was part of Rome at the time period, so technically, Poindexter, he is part of the Roman Empire. So he studied the sky and he maps out 1,000 stars. So again, that's what that little stick was for measuring the stars and to make sure he wasn't naming or mapping the same ones over and over again. So he maps out 1,000 different stars, and it's the case of what did we have beforehand? Not a lot. We had the previous guys who at least looked up in the sky and tried to measure the big stuff. But now someone's trying to map out all of those stars that are dotting the night sky. And again, he's kind of the forefather or grandfather of astronomy, not astrology. That's a different thing. Astronomy. And who hasn't looked up at the sky and gone, what's up there? Why are we here? That type of thing. So it's the same kind of questions he would ask back at that time period and try and figure out, well, what are those things? Again, not 100% accurate in terms of everything, and we had that too with the Greek guys, but it gets us along the way until the next person picks up the baton and runs with it a little bit further from what the previous person had done. And he also explained the study of the planets and the stars as far as he could see them. And, even with the naked eye, you could still see quite a few of them. Just don't look at the sun too long because it might blind you. That would be bad for you. Technically, not a planet either. But again, this guy kind of moves us forward in a different science from the first guy, which was medicine, and now you're into astronomy. Almost astrology. So let's look at the daily life. Because the daily life of people and citizens and civilizations are pretty important because they tell you what they valued, and also tells you that their government values the people if they actually have things available for people to do in their daily life. So you see this picture of Russell Crowe, which is Gladiator. I actually watched this movie in 2000. A long time ago, 20 years ago. And then I watched a movie with Russell Crowe the other day. He doesn't quite look like that, but, I guess I don't look like I look like in 2000 either, which might not be a bad thing. But anyways, so one of the first things here is something called the forum. Now, when we say forum in modern times, it's funny how some of these words historically hit change. Like if I say a forum, people don't think of buildings or structures. They think of like an internet forum, a place where we would gather of having like ideas and talk to each other, like a sports forum or a sewing forum or I don't know, a hair club for men forum. Wait, I don't need that. Not yet. But anyways. So the forum, in essence, is a concrete version of what I just talked about there. It's a place physically where people would gather for a variety of things, including going and talking and being a wise philosopher about things. And you can see this picture here, and you're like, well, that's a really junky forum. Well, easy. It's been 2,000 years. You would look terrible too in 2,000 years ago. And if you look really close down at the bottom part, let me get my pointer going. You can see like these little tiny people. So you can tell how large this is from end to end based on the scale of the little tiny people that are in here. You also look closely all the way in back. You can see the Colosseum back there. So this is Rome. So a forum would be an open space created for a marketplace, and it's set up like modern buildings. Like a good example would be like a shopping mall or like a Times Square, a place where people can gather and they know that you're going to go there. Um, Again, set up like modern cities. Some of you guys are a little slow on the get-go here. But like Times Square, courthouses, it's in the center of your town. How many of you have ever been to Times Square? I have not been. Don't know that I want to because I'm claustrophobic, and I think a lot of people would really just bug me out. I'm really an introvert at heart, even though I probably seem like I'm an extrovert. No, I'm an introvert, and I don't really want to go into the big crowd, nor do I have any inkling of wanting to go on the New Year's Eve there. I think I would have to stand right beside a porta pot, find the closest one, because I'd be afraid I get put in a middle. I'm like, I gotta go to the bathroom, drink too much water or coffee. So I will not be going to that at any time soon. But back to what we were talking about, these forums are important because they give people a place to gather. I'm going backwards here. Again, marketplaces like shops. The best example, as I said, would be a shopping mall, which in 2020 it seemed to be going out of existence, I suppose. But I can remember back in my day, we went to quite a few of these, and there are shops everywhere, and you could socialize with people and go to movies and things like that. So we'll see if we have anything like this in the near future. You hope so, but we'll see, I suppose. And then we get to boring old gladiators. So I don't know that we really need to talk about the Well, okay, I guess we will. So let's talk about the gladiators. Obviously, people know them from movies. You know them from TV shows or things historically that you've seen, and it's always the cool part of Rome, and it really was. But at the same time, and I'll put these videos up for you to click on here. It's the idea of something called bread and circuses. So I call the gladiators like the magic trick of Rome because Rome starts falling apart. Not physically, but socially, economically, idealistically, politically. And a way to get people to not look at what's going on or focus on the bad is to show them something in your other hand, kind of like magicians do. If they're doing a sleight of hand trick, they're doing something with one hand, and all the while it's the other hand that's doing the trick and pulling the coin out of your ear, whatever they're doing. But you're trying to get them to focus on, well, is doing something over here. So it's the idea of bread and circuses. And this phrase comes from Roman officials who said, how do you appease people? Bread and circuses. You give them bread, feed them, and then circuses entertain them. And then it will keep the other people from rioting. And if you think about that, we kind of have that in modern times too. Things that keep us occupied. And I'm not a conspiracy theorist. I'm not going to say that the government is behind any of these things. But this does, again, tell us a lot about our culture and about what we value in terms of our society and civilization. So it does come to these gladiators. So a little bit about gladiators, and I'm sure you know some stuff or have heard some things before. First of all, anybody could be a gladiator. That's the truth. A lot of times people will tell you that's just slaves, that they're thrown in and they're all killed and killing each other. And that's not so much true. The truth is that you could volunteer yourself to go to these gladiator schools because you want some kind of success, you want fame, you want money, perhaps, notoriety, or just you think you're awesome. So you could go to these schools, or you could be captured and then be put in there as slaves who could earn their own freedom. And again, I'll show you some of these other videos, probably show you them Thursday, I think. We'll see how that goes, see which ones I have to drop in there. But anyways, so you're trained from, and it's not like Sparta. You are not trained from like age 5. This is, really any age that they think that you could become a warrior, I suppose. And you are taught a variety of weapons. You can typically have your choice of what kind of armor that you have. So if you've ever seen gladiators or movies, they don't all wear the same thing. They don't always do so well. So sometimes people could die in training, sometimes you could die on the floor of a coliseum, and it's not the big coliseum that everybody got to go to. If I'm scrolling back here just a little bit, you can see this one here. It's a minor one, so you would like go to your minor leagues, and then you would try to get to the big leagues. You try to get to the pros, which would be the Coliseum in Rome. So the idea of gladiators, and I do have a fun little video that I'll show you, share with you, is the American Gladiators from when I was a kid. Your parents might remember them, maybe your grandparent. Gosh, I'm getting old. But it was a show in the late '80s and early '90s where people could compete against these big hulks, against these big guys and girls too, who were often steroided up, and try and compete against them in a variety of like sporting event. You wouldn't like pick up a sword against them, but just to test your metal, yes, against them and see how well you could do. And sometimes they end up well, and sometimes ended up poorly, depending on who you were, I suppose. So back to the ancient time period. Originally, it was man versus man. And how it really started off with is like wrestling, and it was called pancration, and that was from the Greeks. And this was wrestling in its most typical form. You might be familiar with Greco-Roman wrestling, freestyle wrestling, those type of things. And all my wrestlers are like, "Oh, I know what all those are. I don't know like pile drivers, and that's pro wrestling. It's a different thing." So these guys would wrestle, and people are like, this is pretty good. And then they're like, what can we do better? All right, well, let's start hitting and kicking each other. Okay, and that's what pancration ends up being, like really one of your first European-style martial arts. I'm not sure how far the Japanese style or the Chinese style of martial arts predates them. Probably about the same time period. But anyway, so they would be wrestling, they would be boxing, like, this is pretty good. But let's give them sticks and have them beat each other. And again, it was pretty good, but then people are bored and are like, okay, let's give them swords. Let's give them shields. And you're like, man versus man. Okay, let's go 2 versus 1. Let's go 3 versus 2. Let's go 4 versus 4. And then it starts to get more and more. And now it's like, all right, let's take this guy and have him fight a lion. And you're like, well, wait, a lion isn't found in Europe. You're right. So that actually ends up influencing other places and continents like Africa, which isn't too far away, I suppose, geographically. But then they end up bringing in animals of all different sorts. And then there are some stories of different stadiums that had the capability of having water diverted into them. So what they would have is they would have like ship battles, naval ship battles inside. Now, it's not like big aircraft carriers and things, destroyers and things like that. But now I think that would be kind of fun to watch. Of course, I don't want anybody to die, but you're like, I'd like to see a naval battle right in front of me. That would be kind of fun. Um, so it got to be where people were so bloodthirsty that it starts with something small and then it gets to be something that's much, much bigger. And it's like when you play something for the first time, like a game. Like I just got Assassin's Creed, the new one. And, I played it for like a half hour the first time. So I'm like, I'm still trying to get the feel for it. And then my time keeps increasing as I get into the game flow. And I got to like stop myself, be like, all right, you can only play it for like an hour at a time. Each day or every other day or whatever, because then you lose the time that you have with your family and focus on other things. And that's kind of what happened with Rome here is they got so focused on these events, and it's not just the gladiator events, but also they had, and this is really fun, is Circus Maximus. And you can kind of see this here. It's this track. So where the gladiator like coliseums and stuff, if I'm scrolling back here, get out of here, stupid notice thing, whatever that is. It's I said it before, it's your modern football stadium or sporting stadium. Well, this one ends up being like NASCAR's grandfather because they would have these large arenas and they would have chariot races inside them. Circus Maximus means grand, which is Maximus. Circus meaning circus. So it's a big event for people to go to. So bottom line is they had a lot of different things that people could do for entertainment, but it got to the point where they were losing a lot of their focus and wanting to go to this all the time. And some of these events were like months long. every single day, that it was free, that you could go to this and you would get bread thrown to you and then you'd be able to watch these events. And again, sounds pretty cool, but at the same time, you have you're losing a little bit of yourself each time that you're going and watching stuff. All right, so last thing we'll look at is we'll start this. I want to double check where we are. Okay, there we go. Almost done. All right. Because I know it's getting a little bit long, but man, who doesn't want to talk about gladiators? But the last thing is roles in society. We talked about this with Greece and other places as to which genders really dominated or controlled the families. Well, one of the main words here is the word pater familias. Pater familias means father of the family. And you can see the awesome picture of old Pops right here down below in the middle. Yeah, it's kind of weird. Not sure why Dad's posing so much, but okay. But you look at the word pater. Pater means, or vater in German, means father. And this is where we get pa from. Now, where do we get ma from? Mater familias, and that is a mother of the family. Or so in this case, the Italian families or the Roman families, they were led by the father, so they were pater familias. And Italian families were pretty large and pretty important to them. And what I mean by that is, in terms of large, a lot of numbers, so you had a lot of people in your family, but also important because that was your focus on a day-to-day basis, that you wanted to provide for your family. And I kind of feel like I wish we had more of that in modern times, where the Italians were very heartened by their family and supportive, and it said led by the father. Children were to be educated. It doesn't just say girls, it says children were to be educated as a whole. Doesn't mean that there weren't gender ceilings for each of them, though. The boys, awesome picture there, right? Okay. The boys would learn something called rhetoric. Rhetoric is the art of public speaking. Now, this is important, rhetoric, because it's something that you would do as a Roman if you wanted the better job, if you wanted to be a politician, if you wanted to be a scientist or anybody of importance, you had to learn to speak well. And it's something that we do still, we don't use the word rhetoric too much today. It kind of has a different meaning. But you want to be able to speak well. Maybe not so much as I just did when I went you, but you want to be able to speak well. You want to have good vocabulary, and you know, it's something that in my own life, I'm seeing my son who's graduating from high school this year. He's doing scholarship interviews, and one thing that he does do well is public speaking. He speaks well, and that will again open more doors for you in life than rather than the so you need to be able to speak well. You need to be able to have a good vocabulary. So those are things that you can focus on and work on. I'll be honest, because when I was younger myself, I probably didn't think of those things and thought, you know, it was the same way. So as you get older, that's something that you do want to work on, is your vocabulary, and not just your vocabulary, but how you speak to others, and even just something like this here that I'm doing on this video. So moving on. So for the boys, here's the problem area for our young gentlemen in our class is at between ages 14 and 16, they're expected to become men. Now, it doesn't mean that you magically transition physically into men, but instead it's more of a philosophy that between ages of 14 and 16, you burn your toys, you put on a toga, and you do what men do. Now, I'm not exactly sure what that is, but the burning of the toys part, that you're probably like, no, my PS5 now. I just got it for $2,000. Why would I want to throw it in the fire and burn my toy? Yeah, I know, I'm the same way. I still collect toys, so I don't want to burn mine either. For the ladies here, the girls, you learned reading and writing. Now, again, there's a ceiling there. You did learn reading and writing at home. But you were able to learn how to read and write because, A, you prepared for your roles as mothers. Again, that's kind of similar to what the Greeks were. But as I'll go further with this, your expectation too is to be able to run your husband's business. If they served in the army, if they're in the military, you had a better ceiling than you did in Greece, especially in Athens, because you could read and write. But at the same time, you're kind of limited because you were expected to be at home. But it doesn't mean that you weren't involved in, if I can say it, family financial things or running businesses too. So again, a little more limited than, well, actually a lot more limited than what you really wanted it to be, but better than it would have been for Greece or Athens. All right, so That's it. Wow, that's an old one. Ella Poli, now a senior. I should probably change that up. But that's it. That's Rome Part 2, Section 2. So I hope you enjoy it. We'll talk more about gladiators tomorrow or sometime soon. See ya.